Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. In the last video we looked at the pseudo-borderline schizoid, which is a subtype of schizoid identified by J.F. Masterson in the Masterson approach. In this video we're going to look at a case study. It's a relationship between Alex and Jane. Alex is a pseudo-borderline schizoid. I'm going to go through the slides and we'll have a look at how the relationship dynamics played out between them. Alex, a 35-year-old pseudo-borderline schizoid, has been in a long-term relationship with Jane for 3 years. Although they've been together for a significant time, their dynamic is marked by emotional distance, occasional bursts of attachment, and frequent withdrawal. We're going to look at the relationship in phases. So in phase 1, the initial attraction, Alex had a theoretical desire for connection. Alex initially pursued Jane not out of intense emotional longing, but because he felt that having a partner was the right thing to do. He believed that being in a relationship would bring structure and normalcy into his life, and he liked the idea of companionship even if he wasn't emotionally invested. Jane, who is warm and emotionally expressive, provided a sense of security and validation, something that Alex found comforting, but not in a deeply felt way. In phase 2, Alex saw the relationship as an emotional anchor, but not an emotional bond. Over time, Jane began to notice that Alex seemed distant, disengaged, and emotionally unavailable. When Jane expressed concerns about feeling unloved or disconnected, Alex would temporarily respond with reassurance, saying things like, "I do care, I just have trouble expressing it." In reality, Alex was not emotionally invested in the way Jane needed. He didn't truly long for Jane's emotional presence, but he also didn't want to lose her completely. Instead of feeling love in an emotionally engaging way, Alex viewed Jane as an anchor that kept him from falling into complete emotional isolation. I explained in the last video that pseudo-borderlines struggle with existential issues and panic. They particularly isolated and detached from the rest of the world, and they can feel like they don't exist or they're not a person because they have strong depersonalization. So that explains why he didn't want to lose her, and he had a sort of affair related to falling into complete emotional isolation. In phase 3, this is related to the in and out dynamic talked about in the schizoid dilemma. I'll explain. Whenever Jane tried to deepen the relationship emotionally, Alex would start feeling trapped, suffocated, or overwhelmed. He would withdraw for days or weeks at a time, becoming detached, unresponsive, or engrossed in his own internal world. However, if Jane ever threatened to leave, Alex would panic and suddenly become attentive. He might say things like, "I don't want to lose you, I just need space sometimes." Why? Not because he deeply craved emotional closeness, but because the idea of losing Jane completely triggered his fear of total emotional emptiness. So over time, it became apparent that the relationship was more of a functional arrangement than a true emotional bond. As time went on, Jane realized that Alex's attachment was not about love or emotional depth, but about maintaining a certain level of stability. Jane became more and more frustrated, feeling like she was being kept not as a true partner, but as an emotional placeholder. Alex, meanwhile, felt increasingly guilty for not being able to reciprocate Jane's emotional needs, but also feared breaking up because the loss of Jane would mean complete solitude. The final outcome. Eventually, Jane decided to leave, realizing that the relationship was emotionally one-sided. Alex initially felt relief, no more expectations, no more demands for emotional connection. However, after a while, he started experiencing a deep sense of emptiness. Not because he missed Jane, but because he lost his emotional anchor. He did not feel heartbroken in a traditional sense, but rather adrift in the void, disconnected from both himself and the external world. To cope, Alex turned inwards, retreating into fantasy, intellectualizing the breakup, and avoiding new relationships for a long time. Final analysis. Relationships serve as psychological anchors, not sources of deep emotional connection. They fear both engulfment and isolation, seeking connection but withdrawing from intimacy. Their push-pull dynamic involves seeking reassurance yet retreating when closeness feels overwhelming. They lack traditional emotional longing, maintaining relationships for stability rather than love. Breakups trigger existential emptiness, not heartbreak, leading to withdrawal and intellectualization. They rationalize relationships, seeing them as necessary structures rather than emotional bonds. I think that this insight into Alex and how he functioned within the relationship really helps to show how the pseudo-borderline might seem like very needy of a relationship, but that really there is an emotional detachment involved in this, and that it's more of a psychological construct than an emotional connection. And there is some potential for some emotional feelings towards the person. However, because pseudo borderlines detach from emotions, it's going to be difficult to hold that emotional connection consistently over time. And also because emotions tend to be muted in schizoids, the feeling might not be so strong. And the reason for the detachment and the muted emotions is because schizoids need to protect themselves from their own emotional intensity so that they don't feel overwhelmed. So it's really necessary to keep oneself in a kind of a state of stasis. I would say that psychologically, Alex probably did care about Jane and her well-being. However, he just really wasn't able to maintain emotional closeness or to consistently be emotionally present for her. In the next video, we're going to look at Jane's perspective on the relationship and see like how things played out from her perspective on a deeper level and how she dealt with the difficulty of being in a relationship with a pseudo borderline schizoid.